My mother is the strongest woman that I know. What makes my mother so strong? It all starts with her childhood. She was never given an ideal childhood, one that you would dream about, hope you would have, or see on Leave It to Beaver. Her mother, at a very young age of 17, got pregnant with her. Her mother and father was forced to be married because at that time it was frowned upon to have a baby out of wedlock. The tension started from the very beginning, and my mother could feel it. Her father was a hard-working man who would come home and start drinking. Her mother was not very loving or consoling, never told her that she loved her. She was never allowed to have friends at home, nor was she allowed to go out. She's only allowed to talk on the phone for 5 minutes at a time, mostly to her cousins. By the time she turned 18, she had met my father and ran away. They soon had a baby together, but it was not a normal pregnancy. Whenever she was 24 weeks pregnant, she said something didn't feel right, and she could feel the baby's leg hanging out. My father rushed her to the hospital, where she was then rushed to the children's hospital. She gave birth to my sister, who did not make it. They placed her in a box no bigger than a shoebox. My mother had to endure a 3-hour trip home with her baby in a shoebox, dead. But that's okay because my mother persevered. This shows you how strong she is. She was determined to have a family. She gave birth to 2 daughters after. But throughout my childhood, we really got to see how strong my mother was. My father lost his job in the mines, so my mother, who had never worked, had to take on 2 jobs to try to support her family. She decided that 2 jobs was too much. She needed to go back to school. She went back to nursing school to get her LPN degree. Through the middle of her schooling, my sister, at a very young age of 14, got pregnant. So now my mother was faced with trying to support her husband who was out of work and raise her 2 daughters and now her granddaughter. You could imagine the stress this put on their marriage. My mother and father soon separated and got a divorce. My mother was left to raise 2 daughters and her granddaughter as a single parent on her own. My father had worked out of town throughout the weekdays, and my mother had us on the weekdays. She was trying her best to support us, but she soon realized that this was hard, so she went back to nursing school yet again. She had met her new husband while she was in nursing school. He soon moved in with us, portrayed himself to be the best Christian in town. But while she was gone to work, he soon became abusive, not physically but verbally, and he started drinking as well. Whenever my mother would come home, he would pretend that everything was okay and go back to being the holiest man you'd ever seen. One day my mother came home from work early and caught him drinking. They soon divorced, and she had finished her nursing school so she could make it on her own. My mother, which was now an RN, was doing well for herself. Nowadays, my mother has went back to school for nursing yet again, but to get her nurse practitioner. She has become a wonderful, caring, and compassionate nurse. The hospital that she works for now has offered to put my mother on a billboard due to her being so compassionate and the patients loving her. She gets compliments all the time. I hope that I can one day be as strong as my mother. I hope in the eyes of my daughters that they feel that I'm as strong as she is. I want to be as great as she is. My mother is the strongest woman I have ever known.